Hello everyone. In this class, we'll learn about vestibular apparatus. Vestibular apparatus is a sensory organ for detecting sensation of equilibrium. It is encased in a system of bony tubes and chambers located in the petrous part of the temporal bone, which is called as bony labyrinth. Within this system are membranous tubes and chambers which are called as membranous labyrinth. The membranous labyrinth is the functional part of the vestibular apparatus and it consists of three semicircular canals and the otolith organ, which are called as saccule and utricle. There are two sac-like structures or organs. This diagram showing vestibular apparatus which consists of semicircular canals which are uh, they are represented in the three planes and they are 90 degrees to each other, and you have utricle and saccule. Semicircular canals. Semicircular canals are the tubular structures placed at right angles to each other. Because of this type of arrangement, semicircular canals represent three axes of rotation, that is vertical axis, anteroposterior and transverse axis. The three membranous canals are horizontal, that is lateral, superior or anterior, and inferior, which is posterior. They contain endolymph and are separated from bony canal by perilymph. Each canal begins as a dilation, that is, which is called as ampulla, and which containing projections which are called as ridges on its inner part, and they are called as crista ampullaris. Cristae are the receptors of the semicircular canals. And each cresta consists of hair cells and substenticular cells, which are also called as supporting cells, surrounded by gelatinous partition that closes off the ampulla, and that gelatinous partition is called as cupula. The process of hair cells are embedded in the cupula, and the bases of hair cells are in close contact with the afferent fibers of the vestibular division of the vestibulocochlear nerve. So this diagram showing the crista, that is the receptors of semicircular canals. This is the diagram of transverse section of uh, semicircular canals, and this is the crista. And in the crista, you can see the hair cells which are embedded, the hair cells which are embedded in the cupula, and you can see the kinocilium and stercocelia, which are embedded in the cupula in the endolymph. And these are the supporting cells to the hair cells, and you can see the afferents which are arising uh, through the vestibular division of eighth nerve. Otolith organs, which are called as utricle and saccule. The otolith organ is formed by utricle and saccule. The utricle communicates with the saccule by means of ductus endolymphaticus. Both utricle and saccule contains a projecting ridge called as macula. Like it is very similar to the cristae, and they are receptors in the otolith organ. Like crista, macula is also found by hair cells and supporting cells which project into the firm gelatinous material which is called as cupula. A large non-motile hair cells called as kinocilium is located at one end of the hair cells. In the remaining hair cells, small cilia with progressive increase in the height are present and they are called as stercocelia. Between the hair cells lie the fibers of origin of vestibular division of eighth nerve. In the saccule and utricle, the cupula contains mainly the chalky, that is calcium carbonate particles, which are called as otoliths or otoconia, and hence the name otolith organ. The hair cells plus uh, gelatinous material containing calcium carbonate is called as otolith organ. When head is in the normal erect position, the macula of each utricle is in horizontal plane, whereas macula of each saccule in the vertical plane. So here you can see uh, the otolith organ when standing in a resting position, macula they are placed vertically, and otolith organs they are placed horizontally. You can see the hair cells and the hair cells, the kinocilium or stercocilium being embedded into the otolith membrane. Here the structure of again the hair cells, that is otolith organ, showing otolithic membrane which is composed of gelatinous material containing calcium carbonate, and the hair cells being embedded into the otolith organ. Okay. And here you can see the hair cell. Each hair cell, they are made up of kinocilium, which are the tallest one, and the smaller one are called as stercocilia. Functions of vestibular apparatus. Vestibular apparatus plays an important role in postural activity. The otolith organ, saccule and utricle, is stimulated by gravity and semicircular canals activated by rotational movements. And it plays important role in the postural activity as it gives rise to afferent impulses which reflexly adapt the position of the trunk and limbs to that of the head, thus enable the erect position of the head and thus the normal posture of the head to be maintained. The information from the vestibular apparatus also reaches the cranial nerve nuclei, which supplies the eye muscles and the cerebral cortex. This helps in the recognition of the position and the movements of the head. As a result, the position of the eyes is held approximately constant, allowing visual fixation on the moving objects. Coming to the vestibular pathways, nerve fibers arise from the cristae and maculae to form vestibular division of 8th cranial nerve. The nerve cells bodies are situated in the vestibular ganglion, which is also called as Scarpa's ganglion. The central axons of the Scarpa's ganglion proceed towards the brainstem and end in ipsilateral vestibular nucleus and flocculonodular lobe of cerebellum. Each vestibular nuclei has 4 subparts, that is lateral, which is also called as diatus. Then you have a superior, medial and inferior, which is also called as spinal vestibular nuclei. The efferent fibers from the vestibular nucleus terminate in the following regions. They can terminate on the 3rd, 4th, 6th cranial nerve via medial longitudinal fasciculus. Therefore, stimulation of the vestibular nuclei leads to the movement of the eye. Then the efferents also goes to the anterior horn of the spinal cells via anterior and lateral lateral vestibulospinal tract. Then the efferent goes to the cerebellum, then to the nucleus of reticular formation. They also go to the primary somatosensory cortex via opposite thalamus. So this is showing the vestibular pathway. The fibers which are rising from the crista macula, they are going to go to the vestibular nucleus, which have superior, lateral, medial and inferior division. From here, the efferents can go to the extraocular muscles. They may go to the opposite, the cerebellum. They can go to the reticular formation. They can go to the brainstem via vestibulospinal tracts. Functioning of vestibular apparatus, the mode of action of otolith organ. The saccule and utricle provide information about linear acceleration and change in the head position relative to the force of gravity. Saccule responds to vertical acceleration and utricle to horizontal acceleration. The macula of the saccule and utricle are the stretch receptors. When in erect posture, the otolith membranes are so placed that hair cells are least disturbed. Based on the bending of the head, that is sideways or ventro or dorsiflexion, the gravity acts. The hair cells thus deform, with resulting in stimulation of the nerve fibers which lie between them. So this is the hair cells situation when they are resting activity, they are straight, and when there is a change because of the effect of the gravity, the hair cells, they are going to move or they kink, so which are going to cause depolarization whenever the stercocilia move towards the kinocilium, and the inhibition of these cells occurs when opposite thing is going to happen, when the stercocilia moves away from the kinocilium. The saccule is stimulated when there is a sideward flexion of the neck, that if the head is tilted to the right, the capilla of the right saccule hangs downwards and pulls on its macula, thus maximally stimulated. In left saccule, there is upward movement of the capilla to produce minimal stimulation. The utricular macula are stimulated when there is a ventro or dorsiflexion of the neck. When head is in erect position, the 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 there is a minimum stimulus to the hair cells, and when head is bent forward or backward, there will be maximal stimulation of these hair cells. For this reason, the macula of sacculae and utricle are called as gravity receptors. The receptors of vestibular apparatus show little or no adaptation. Mode of action of semicircular canals. The semicircular canal detects angular action during rotation of the head along the three perpendicular axes. When the person rotates in clockwise direction, that is the vertical axis, horizontal canal moves in clockwise direction, but there is no corresponding movement of endolymph inside the canal at the beginning of rotation due to the inertia. This phenomena causes a relative displacement of the endolymph in the direction opposite to that of rotation of head. That is, the fluid is pushed in anti-clockwise direction. Thus, in the right semicircular canal, the endolymph flows towards the ampulla, which leads to stimulation, and in the left canal, the fluid moves away from the ampulla, which is going to lead to inhibition by decreasing the impulse discharge. The combination of increased discharge from one ampulla and decreased discharge from the other form the basis of detection of direction of the movement. The movement of endolymph in semicircular canal in turn causes corresponding movement of the gelatinous cupula, causing cilia or hair cells to bend, leading to stimulation of the hair cells. Thus, at the beginning of rotation in clockwise direction around the vertical axis, the hair cells at the ampulla of the horizontal canal in right ear are stimulated, but the hair cells in the horizontal canal of the left ear are not stimulated. Okay, so this is a diagram showing the movement of the endolymph. So when the canals move suddenly, so the fluid in the semicircular canals, they are going to move into the opposite direction and stimulating the hair cells, whereas opposite thing is going to happen in the other ear, where the fluid is going to move away from the hair cells, and which are leading to inhibition, and this differential excitation and inhibition is the basis for detection of the movement. Because of the stimulation of the hair cells in the right horizontal canal and through the sensory nerve fibers to vestibular, cerebellar, and reticular centers, now these centers send proper instruction to various muscles of the body to maintain equilibrium of the body during angular acceleration, that is during rotation. On the other hand, rotation in anti-clockwise direction causes stimulation of the hair cells in the ampulla of horizontal canal in left ear only. Adaptation of the receptors in the semicircular canal. During rotation of the hair cells of the crista ampullaris, during the rotation, the hair cells of the crista ampullaris generate impulses, at the rate of 500 to 100, 50 to 100 impulses per minute at rest. At the beginning of the rotation, the discharges increases to 600 to 800 impulses per minute. However, rapid discharges of impulses last only for first 20 to 25 seconds of rotation. Afterwards, during continuous rotation, the frequency of impulses falls back to resting level as endolymph starts moving along with the semicircular canal at the same speed. So this causes adaptation of the hair cells. The important function of these vestibular apparatus is in the regulation of the posture. The tract that sends from the vestibular nuclei into spinal cord maintains the tone in the anti-gravity muscle and coordinates the adjustment made by the limbs and eyes in response to change in the body position. The vestibular apparatus thus play a role in support of head during movement, orientation of the head in space, and in reflexes, that is, the tonic labyrinthine and writing reflexes which are accompanying locomotion. That is why vestibular apparatus is sometimes called sense organ of balance or equilibrium. It also helps in the control of the eye movements via its ascending connections to the cranial nerve nuclei. Therefore, in spite of changes in the head position, the eye can remain fixed on the same point through the vestibulo-ocular reflexes. For example, if the head is rotated to the left, the eyes move towards the right in order to prevent an image from moving off the fovea. They also help in orientation in space. Orientation, that is the relative position of the various body parts in space, depends on four inputs, that is from the vestibular receptors, visual information, and by impulses which are coming from proprioceptors in the joint capsule and impulses which are coming from the cutaneous exteroreceptors. Coming to some of the vestibular dysfunction, the motion sickness. Motion sickness occurs when a person traveling by ship rides uh, or rides a rough in sea, and he is expected to develop seasickness. Similar symptoms can also develop when traveling by air or in rough bus journey. All all such sickness are called as motion sickness. It is due to the excessive and repeated stimulation of vestibular apparatus. The symptoms include nausea, vomiting, sweating, diarrhea, pallor, salivation, discomfort, headache, and disorientation and lack of emotion. So how to prevent this? It is prevented by avoiding greasy and bulky food before the travel and taking antiemetics, that is a drug which prevents nausea and vomiting. So this is in brief about vestibular apparatus. Thank you.